All right. Another question from the community. So it's Meals Only May. You have to eat at least 30 grams of protein in every meal. So the question came up, why don't we count plant proteins as part of that?
Yeah. So I just said, we're just trying to get rid of nonsense snacking, right? Just eat proper meals. None of this grazing bullshit stuff. How are we going to define what's a meal? It has to contain 30 grams of protein from an animal source. People are like, why don't we count the plant proteins? Why don't I count my peanut butter or my almonds or whatever? And for several reasons. There's 3 big reasons. To get nerdy, we don't actually just want protein. We want amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. They're like the Lego blocks, and then the proteins are what you build out of them. There are infinity combinations of ways you can combine amino acids to make proteins, different kinds of proteins. So we're not actually just looking for any protein. We're looking for specific amino acids and in the right amounts and ratios. There's 20 amino acids that you build proteins out of. 9 of them are essential, and a few more of them are conditionally essential depending on certain things like injuries and that kind of stuff. So we need these 9 essential amino acids. We need amino acids in the right ratios. We actually have no ability to store amino acids. There's nowhere, it's not like your fat tissue where you can store lipids. You can build proteins like muscles, and you can have muscle tissue, but you don't just store a pool of amino acids. And if your body is trying to build something and one of the necessary components is missing, the whole production line grinds to a halt.
Right.
So they call it Liebig's law. If you imagine a barrel with planks, the barrel will only hold water up to the level of the shortest plank. And that's it. That's the rate limiter. And so all those other amino acids that are kicking around but can't be used to build anything have to get excreted. You deaminate them, you take the nitrogen off, and you have to basically excrete them or turn them into something else, which eventually, if you had too much of that going on, is hard on your kidneys. So you can end up with the problem of too much protein, but actually from not enough protein, which is weirdly paradoxical to think of. So plant proteins are deficient in many of the necessary amino acids, but 3 in particular: leucine, lysine, and methionine. The big ones that are needed to build DNA, and your cells are replicating all the time. Leucine is really important for building muscle mass, etc. So those 3 are like big time rate limiters. So if we're meeting our protein targets, but from too many plant proteins, we're not actually really meeting our amino acid target. So while you may have some additional amino acids topping up, you have to get the majority of your protein from animal-based sources. Those come in the right amounts and ratios and everything that you need.
Right. And then a lot of the refined, processed, garbage type foods don't have any animal protein, right? So often the protein bars and stuff are like pea protein or whatever.
Protein, soy isolate, or whey protein.
I guess whey protein,
is pretty easy to isolate from dairy.
And whey's okay.
Yeah.
Right? That has all the...
But whey protein shouldn't supply all of your protein. It can top up the last 10%, but it shouldn't be the primary way that you get your protein. Okay, so there's amino acid availability, proper amounts in the right ratios. Plant foods aren't it. There's the bioavailability, which is just because something is in a food doesn't mean you can digest it and get it into you.
Right.
Those are 2 totally different things. So the way they figure out what's in something is they like blend it up and put it in a mass spectrometry machine, and they see what comes out. What were all these atoms, basically? That's pretty irrelevant to how human digestion and assimilation work. So just because a plant food has protein in it doesn't mean that you had the ability to break it down into its amino acid components and absorb it through your gut lining into you and make use of it. So the analogy I was using was like, you're trying to build something. You're trying to build a shed, and you need 2x4s to start building your shed. You're like, I need wood to build my shed. And what gets delivered is plywood. You're like, this is technically wood, but this is the wrong wood. And the whole thing grinds to a halt until you get your 2x4s.
Right.
That's the wrong amino acids. The bioavailability is like, oh, they delivered the 2x4s, but they're in a box and it's locked and you don't have the key. And you're like, well, okay, yeah, technically they're in there, but I can't get at them. So this doesn't help me at all. I'm still not building my shed. And then the third issue with trying to use plant sources to meet protein targets is that if we're doing it from whole foods, which is like the basis of everything, it's just, it comes with so much extra junk.
Yeah.
Like for you to try to get 30 grams of protein from quinoa, it's 840 calories.
Right.
Or like to try to get 30 grams of protein from almonds, it's 780 calories versus 30 grams of protein from chicken is 140 calories.
Right.
So
there's just a ton of like extra carbs or fats.
Yeah, extra carbs or
that.
fats that come. It's just so diluted in protein that it becomes impossible. It becomes ridiculous to try to meet protein targets from plant source foods. So it would be like your 2x4s got delivered, but they came with so much excessive styrofoam and plastic packaging that now your yard is overflowing with garbage. Right. You're like, I can't build in here. There's too much extra shit. So I think for those 3 reasons, that's why we don't use plant foods to get protein or to hit any kind of protein targets. Will you get some ancillary bits of protein from your nuts and your peanut butter and your maybe a little bit of quinoa you ate in your salad or whatever? It's like, sure. We just don't count those ones.
Right.
Those are, if they get in you and you got a few bonus reps, bonus grams, fine.
Yeah.
And then that also saves us from some of the crimes against nutrition in food marketing and processed food, which is things like the Kodiak cakes, waffle and pancake mix,
right,
which has vital wheat gluten added to it. Wheat gluten is the protein in wheat. Not all protein is good protein. Mm-hmm. Some people have celiac disease where they cannot eat gluten. Some people have non-celiac gluten sensitivity, not celiac, but they still don't do well with it. Some people can be okay. No human on earth functions better with super duper concentrated gluten added to their food.
Right.
But the food marketers can put on the label high protein because technically gluten's a protein.
Yeah.
But if you know that and you know that's not the source of protein that you're targeting, then you're getting it from whole foods. Okay, so if we want to tie this all together, you need certain amino acids to build other things. Your nitric oxide that you were talking about is made from an amino acid called arginine. Best source is animal foods. Melanin that we were just talking about is made from an amino acid called tyrosine. Also best source is animal foods, right? And you can keep going through that list if we want to talk about mental health. Well, serotonin is downstream or is upstream of melatonin is made from tryptophan. Best source is animal foods, right? Like you can keep going through these things of all of the very many processes in your body that you need these certain amino acids, or you can't make that thing without it.
And I think supplementing those things from like non-natural sources just doesn't cut it. It's just not nearly as effective as getting it from a real actual food source. Mm-hmm. So there's certainly something about not just those individual ingredients, but the actual symphony of the food working together as a whole is better than all of its parts.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Yeah. And when we talk about functional movements, we talk about how they're compound yet irreducible. We can talk about functional foods are compound yet irreducible. You cannot create human health by supplementing this amino acid in that one and this vitamin in that one. Like that's not the same thing. I think I've been kind of mulling this over. In nutrition in general, people are trying to give the public, the average person, an easy filter for how to make the right decisions, a heuristic of how do you decide, should I eat this, yes or no? And we don't want to make things super complicated. So we're always trying to make things a little bit more simple. But like any test or any filter, you want to filter out the bad things and you want to keep the good things. No filter is going to be 100%. So some of them are better than others. Don't eat anything with animal products in it, like vegan. You're like, okay, well, we're going to get rid of fried chicken. So that's probably positive. But we're going to keep Oreos and like basically all processed foods are vegan plant foods.
Because there's no food in there.
Maybe you get rid of like the hot dog that also came with a bun and sugary ketchup. So that's not a very good filter. We're going to filter out a lot of really healthy foods and we're going to be left still with a lot of really garbage foods. So that's not a good filter. If we go, hey, every meal focus on get enough protein, hit a protein target for the day. If we made it that simple, then people are like, oh, protein cookies, protein pancakes, protein shakes, protein whatever. And it's all this like fake food products thing, trying to achieve as like a fake form of health through fake foods.
Right.
Not quite. That wasn't quite the thing. So what if we said, okay, filter number 1 needs to be real food, real whole food, single ingredient items. We're like, okay, now we're doing like pretty good. And then if we go, okay, well, next now as we build our meals, we want to center them around animal-based foods, but we already said whole foods. So now we're getting the protein. So that's cool. But we're also getting all the vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and all the great stuff. Nutrients tend to follow protein. So that's why if you use the 2 basic filters of eat real whole foods, focus on animal-based nutrition at each meal, you're doing pretty good to get yourself to good quality, not just protein, but also nutrients, a nutritious diet as well.
Right.